ambiguity, of course, of Beckett's response. Whatever the contrary of being English is or may have been, Beckett didn't specify. But he made it very clear, at least, that as for labels like English, French, or American, he wasn't going to have anything.
If you've been following me for a while, you will know that I love
to gauge how far from that position it has today fallen. And thereafter fell completely silent. The beauty of this story is the superb ambiguity, of course, of Beckett's response. Whatever the contrary of being English is or may have been, Beckett didn't specify. But he made it very clear, at least, that as for labels like English, French, or American, he wasn't going to have anything to do with them, nothing positive to say about them, positive in the sense of affirmative, patriotic, or even so much as a simple designation. On the contrary. I'm going to talk about the American situation today, but not in strictly speaking affirmative and positive ways. We're all Americans here, yes, but what is being done by the official America, does it correspond to what we are and what we want? I shall argue no. And that the whole issue of what America is or says it is very much up for grabs, and certainly as citizens, it's our duty, I think, to enter the fray. Despite what General J. Garner, pro-consul and major contractor in Iraq, was quoted as saying, I quote him now, we ought to look in a mirror and get proud and stick out our chests and suck in our bellies and say, damn, we're American. To which I say, on the contrary. Nevertheless, I don't have any ready formula for what is America or American, because I shall argue, as I did in my book Orientalism, that identities are very much made or constructed in comparison with other similarly constructed identities, and that the America that we see today in the Middle East, for example, is something that needs to be examined and rediscovered for the formidably complicated and frequently destructive thing that it really is, despite all the festivals of joy and victory that we seem to be celebrating about what happened in Iraq and may happen again elsewhere in the region. My own view is that there are many Americans, and that very pluralism is precisely what is so unique and precious about this amazing country. Its immigrant population, its diversity of races and cultures, its openness to the whole world. I believe all that is now threatened by a narrow, chauvinist view of America that dominates the country by the current Washington administration, turned in on itself, threatening our basic freedoms and most of all our democracy, as well as threatening the world itself, and hectoring, belligerent, moralistic, and intolerant terms and actions. Even though I shall have a lot to say here, I realize that I can't say everything or get even close to covering all that needs to be said. So feel free later to raise questions. But first, a word or two about history and interpretations of history. Interpretations, that is, that depend on the perspective of who speaks, who is being spoken to, and for what reason. And this, far from being an idle academic or intellectual game, is the key to politics, which, as the English political philosopher John Donne puts it elegantly in his incomparably intelligent book, The Cunning of Unreason, Making Sense of Politics, politics is never passion, ludicrousness, or even misery. But politics, I continue quoting, but politics is always how human beings see their world. Above all, the role and significance of one another in making it what it is, and how they choose to try to master it, to bend it to their wills, how they judge, and how these judgments impel them to act. Often, perhaps, on careful examination, always, mastering it includes, and perhaps principally requires, subduing, eluding, persuading, or enlightening one another. End of quote. Most of our fellow citizens have an understandably vague idea of what Middle Eastern, and more particularly Arab history is. And they have only the most general idea of what American policy in the world at large actually is. Certainly the mass media is most eligible. But from the point of view of most Arabs, there are facts that need to be acknowledged and understood before we, as Americans, presume to make generalizations about democracy and terrorism and politics, not only in the Arab world, but also in this world. As both an American and an Arab, I chafe, and indeed become angry when I hear dogmatic statements about Arab violence and American materialism, because both seem to be reductive and simply wrong. There's an important role in such political discussions for the role of history, remembering politics is trying to bend history and how to judge and how these judgments compel us to act. This is what politics is. There's an important role, therefore, in political discussions for the role of history, and for that of intelligent understanding. Let me try to provide that. The Arab world, from the Mediterranean to the eastern borders of Iraq, and, by the Mediterranean, I don't mean just the eastern Mediterranean, I'm talking about the whole of North Africa, the Levant, and the eastern borders of Iraq, has been ruled by outside powers, let's say non-Arab powers, continuously since the 16th century. First there was the Ottomans, then after they were defeated in World War I, it was the British, the French, then after World War II and the discovery of vast amounts of oil, it was the United States and Israel, which has become a regional superpower with a formidable army and nuclear arsenal, much of it supplied by the United States. True, there have been independent governments in the region, but all of them, without significant exception, operated in an atmosphere of national emergency. Hence, the distortions and despotism that have occurred there. These despotisms and distortions have occurred there as a result, as a reaction to outside powers trying to control the outside world. And these governments and policies then, must be added, took place in a general atmosphere of anti-colonial, anti-imperial struggle. The early years of post-war, post-Second World War independence in the Arab world were marked by such outside influence as the 1956 Suez War, the French War in Algeria, and the effects of the Cold War. Since 1967, Israel has been in military occupation of Palestinian territories, and this after the destruction of Palestine by Arab Palestine in 1948. The Syrian Golan Heights are still occupied, as until recently were a large part of South Lebanon and the whole of the Sinai Peninsula. In the Gulf, the Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, etc., all the countries there operate now as American protectorates. All oligarchies threatened from the outside for their oil and their specific. Today, the United States is in military occupation of one of its largest and most significant Arab countries throughout, and shows no sign of leaving there soon. You'll understand from all this that in Arab eyes, there is no real independence. The situation compounded not only by the new colonial occupation of Iraq, by the U.S., whose government and mass media have conducted also an unremitting onslaught against the Arab people, their culture, and their tradition, but also by the rule of mostly military, unpopular government, Arab governments, who claim to be in power as a safeguard against further outside intervention. Every Arab will tell you that these are unrepresentative, these Arab governments are outsiders have had designs on what they feel is their land, their water, their resources, and their fate. Perhaps the essence of what I'm talking about, the sense of being threatened from the outside, is embodied in a recent front page New York Times photograph that shows swaggering Donald Rumsfeld leaning back expansively in a huge main cabin, what seems to be his personal jumbo jet, en route to Iraq and the Gulf, surrounded by what seem to be dozens of aides, bodyguards, generals, and experts, who ring him like courtiers surrounding Caligula in one of his fine imperial palaces. Then, when he arrives in countries like Qatar and Kuwait, he's shown being usually abject welcoming smiles by local potentates in flowing robes, faceless and nameless, but to everyone concerned, are known to rule those who keep them at Rumsfeld's pleasure. He is a conqueror of Iraq, and indeed a receiver of the world. In the background are a string of U.S. military bases from the Gulf to the northern Caspian Sea in about 15 countries, to say nothing also of many, many more bases, dozens of countries elsewhere in the Pacific, European, and New Orleans now. To an Arab, seeing all this, a new outside power has come to change why it's there directly. You will appreciate this, if not, please trust me. So in short, I think it's wrong to say that imperialism ended. It didn't. Although in fact, it continues today in forms that as Americans make us feel deeply uncomfortable and dissatisfied with the fact that we are following the empire in the footsteps of all the others who must have a lifetime study of empire. Every empire in its official discourse says that it is not an empire, that it's different, and that it has the unique history and power to do things for culture and civilization and democracy that no one has attempted before. Launched at the very heart of the official American undertaking in the Middle East is the same imperialist thing, except that Bush, Rumsfeld, and the others have a media, many intellectuals, who have internalized the official and much reiterated theme of American altruism and beneficence, and never questioned or are bothered by what it is we do. That is why one is grateful for occasional glimmers of edifying honesty, such as was offered recently by Michael Levine, a member of the Pentagon's advisory group and a veteran of the Iran-Contra scandal, now the holder of the Freedom Share at the American Enterprise Institute. I quote, "Every 10 years or so, the United States needs to pick up some small, crappy little country and throw it against the wall just to show the world we do business." In fact, however, most of us are lied to and manipulated. Journalists were embedded in military units and saw only what they were allowed to see. Moreover, everything they wrote had to be approved by the Pentagon. That was why the Arab satellite channel Al Jazeera, I see it, I have a satellite there, was many times more informative than CNN, for example, and the panel discussion on Al Jazeera much more interesting, since in the U.S. media, dissent was mostly absent, and ignorant so-called experts were relied on to provide prepackaged cliches about the Arabs and the Iraqis that simply reinforced what had already been decided upon by a small group within the administration. The case against Iran has warranted an enormously expensive construction report, now estimated at $1 billion, was, in my opinion, entirely ineffective to conceal the ask that question, needs to ask that question very seriously. Beyond the self-glorification of power, totally self-recognition, the real reasons for this war were oil and domination. And this is why there's been a convergence between extremist Israeli and U.S. orchestras. Ask yourself the question, if Iraq had been the world's largest exporter of arms, would there have been a war? And were it not also the only Arab country that, because of its wealth and the advanced development of its people, might have been a threat to Israel's domination, not its existence, but its domination? Would Menachem Begin have bombed it? Would have not bombed it in 1981? Of course, that is why it was bombed. And that was why the U.S. invaded at war. Just look at the list of reasons that were so cynically hawked about by Bush and his lackey, and see how all of them fade into nothing immediately. First of all, no weapons of mass destruction were found on the almost cosmic level that had been claimed before the war. Iraq, and of course, some of the media, I mean, take Judith Miller of the New York Times, who's there every day to assure us that they're about to discover that they thought they found them, that some defector did it, but then he changed the story and the weapons were not found. She reports this every single day in what is considered the newspaper of record. She's a disgrace to her profession and to the media in general. Another reason, Iraq was portrayed as an imminent threat. This is the phrase I'm quoting directly towards Bush. That Iraq is an imminent threat to the security of the United States, 7,000 miles away, rubbing, as the 20 useless missiles fired incompetently by the Iraqis into the Kuwaiti desert amply testified. Another false claim, Iraq is a fearsome military machine, not war over 3 weeks, because, as the media never remembered to mention, Iraq is a population already bled dry of U.S. British sanctions, its population decimated by depression, malnutrition, the morale of its people sapped, and the reality of its culture and human actuality is completely effaced in public consciousness. Another claim that it stands for democracy and for destroying Iraq as it is democracy. The source of this sophisticated, outrageous, claim was the inbred and opportunistic circle of Iraqi exiles who told their U.S. patrons what they wanted to hear, as well as previous authorities like Bernard Lewis. Now, I want also to say that there's no example in history of democracy, which is undefined in this case, of democracy being brought in on the barrel of a gun, despite the facile analogies made with the cases of Germany and Japan after World War II. The fact is that aside from pillaging and chaos, the U.S. has in fact created 2 new things in Iraq by invading the country. One, a new, highly militant Islamic movement in Iraq, which it doesn't have means at all to handle or understand or circumvent. And second, it's created a coalition of U.S.-approved, quite unrepresentative groups, including corrupt exile leaders with no constituency in Iraq, and 2 current groups who have a lot of sport to settle with Iraq's Arab Gulf. So this is the immediate result of our invasion to bring democracy. The same flawed logic applies to the U.S.'s appalling ideas and plans for what it will do now. Like Israel, after its reinvasion, I should say, of the West Bank last spring, the U.S. wants the world to pick up the tab for the damages the Bush government has caused us. Right, understand it. They now want the UN there because they want the UN to pay for what they did. And it also wants Iraq to become a happy hunting ground for every rapacious corporation in the book. With a militant, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim Likud like Paul Bremer now in charge, who's a trustee of the Jewish Institute for National Defense, the prospects for a future country in Iraq look dim indeed. This America is following in Britain's imperial footsteps there, but unlike Britain, we don't have a cadre of colonial administrators. We don't have a core of Middle Eastern Arabs or Arabists to rely on. All that seems to be present are ideological hawks whose ideas come out of their head and which they read, and whose ideas are dominated by a virulent pro-Israel and anti-Arab bias at the expense of the lived experience, all of it at the expense of the lived experience of actual, real people. It makes me weak. As for the argument that Iraq, I'm still going through the list of arguments for war, that Iraq had violated UN resolutions, number 5, the UN resolutions, it was said. Well, it's true, it did violate. But the violations by Israel and the United States have been far greater. Which the ineffable Richard Pearl has delivered himself of the standard American line when he said in The Guardian shortly after the war ended that the UN was dead and deserved gone. What didn't occur to him or to anyone else is that the UN was not created to serve the US's imperial vagaries, but exactly the opposite. This was a war universally acknowledged, therefore, to be illegal and immoral. The whole of the world suffered. What a dreadful precedent this has set for the U.S. and for other states who may wish to claim God and good and then intervene militarily against some weak country next to them. The UN's refusal to go along reflected the world majority. No one, not even the American electorate, which was not consulted anyway, has given George Bush, who apparently praised himself into goodness every morning and evening, in readiness for battle against evil. No one gave him the right unilaterally, with Tony Blair, to go to war so bravely. What I find particularly galling is the condescension in the whole thing, in the way it was described. The assumption that the American people that listened to all the bills about freeing Iraq was that the way they thought the American people listened to all that was little more than an assembly of moronic school children, despite the misleading, not to say manipulative polls that gave Bush such an illusory support for mayhem and rapacity abroad. So it is true, as Tony Judd has brilliantly stated it in the New York Review of Books, the issue of May the 1st, and I quote, that if you want to understand how America appears to the world today, I hope I'm not insulting too many people, consider, he said, you want to understand how America is viewed in the world today, consider the sport including people. Oversized and overweight, the SUV disdains negotiated agreements to restrict atmospheric pollution. It consumes inordinate quantities of scarce resources to furnish the privileged inhabitants with super-erogatory services, unneeded services. It exposes outsiders to deadly risk in order to provide for the illusory security of its occupants. In a crowded world, the SUV appears as a dangerous anachronism. Like U.S. foreign policy, the sport utility vehicle comes packaged in sonorous mission statements. But underneath, it is just an oversized pickup truck with too much power. In the Arab world, America is now mainly known for its interest in oil, its disdain of Arabs and Muslims, and its blind, unconditional support for Israel's systematic human rights abuses of Palestinian people. In all, an intolerable record of extremism, sheer sadistic cruelty, and obdurate willingness to accept the equal existence of another people. It is not at all accidental American campaign in Iraq and support in Afghanistan against world terrorism has been cynically accompanied and exploited by General Sharon, who must have been chosen on a June day last year to have heard himself described by George Bush as a man of peace. In this country, we are all so used to cliches about Israel's democracy and its precarious existence that we're simply unable to see what behind all the mirth and the propaganda about wanting peace, Israel has really been about, with full U.S. power. The Iraq campaign bears all the marks of Israeli attitudes to the Arabs, from the racist idea that they only understand the language of power, to the arrogance trying to impose their will on everyone, to the notion that if they go to this area, then the area has to change the regime. Look what Sharon did in Lebanon in 1982, when the 17,000 most civilian Palestinians and Lebanese was responsible for killing, when his army surprised to change the Lebanese regime and failed. Look also what Israel has always done to that minute. But for an honest statement of what Israel is really about, here is the Israeli chief of staff, Moshe Ya'alon, saying that the aim of Israel's policy is to lead the Palestinians to internalize in the deepest recesses of their conscience that they are a defeated people. This is Israeli policy stated candidly, and I must say with admirable talent. For us, this is not a new policy. It comes on the heels of a long campaign to erase Palestinians from any human or political consideration. Well-meaning liberals consider that all the problems for Israel began in 1967 these same home, I mean, the continuation of these same 40,000 Palestinians who were given home in Iraq, they were kicked out of their own home, are now being kicked out of the home by Iraqis and Saudi Arabia. In countries where Palestinians have been fortunate enough to acquire citizenship, there are invidious laws that discriminate against them as somehow different from the rest of the population. This is sadly true even in the United States. Inside non-Jewish Palestinians are underrepresented. They are deliberately not allowed rights of immigration, land acquisition, or leasing. These rights are automatically accorded to Jewish citizens of the state. Since late 2001, mixed up pressure on the community has been applied, even though they represent over 20% of Israel's population. As for the West Bank and Gaza, where Rachel Corey calls the life, the 36-year-old patriarch is now the longest and most brutally sustained democracy. We don't ever get out of Palestine. been going on there every day for 36 years. As in the meantime, dozens and dozens of new settlements have been set up on Palestinian land. Conversely, how many Palestinian settlements have infringed on Israeli property? How many daily armed incursions, sometimes with 60 tanks? 60 tanks! That's in proportion to what the U.S. used in Iraq. That's 10 times the amount. We're a much smaller population, about 3 million people in West Africa. One village with having 4,000 people, 60 tanks enter the village. We're talking about, 60-ton tanks and 60-ton bulldozers coming in. With all the ritual and fuss surrounding the planting of trees in Israel, does anyone bother to recall that an average of 896 Palestinian trees per day have been uprooted by Israeli settlers and soldiers since the beginning of the Intifada in October 2000? So this kind of continual brutalization of the United States and Israel designed the peace process that lasted 10 years, which is not even surprising the start war, which slightly less than that. Yes, the peace process requiring thousands of hours of negotiations to make Israel stop, which of course it didn't at all. And now the roadmap to do more of the same, cover up what was actually going on in the country. The man who was put it,
Okay, so we had some minor fuck-ups yesterday, and some minor fuck-ups today, but I think I did it in that I successfully streamed to this account. That's cool. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll try not to detune my synth in the middle of the stream. That was bad. But yeah, thanks. I'll try to do this weekly. I don't know. We're just fucking around. Alright, well, now I'm gonna figure out how to end the stream, which I don't know how to do. Maybe it'll go away right now.